Oh no. I run more. Hi, how are you? It's been a while.
Would you mind just holding those? I'm going to give those. Actually, let's put it back here. Yeah, actually, let me put this one in the West Bank and elsewhere over there. That has not changed. There was no credible evidence that anybody has seen that has that would support these designations, and a number of countries have sent folks over there to look at it, and they have not found it convincing. So that situation is one. The other issue that came up more recently is the endorsement by AIPAC of the Congresswoman, and we find that a very troubling development. AIPAC is not just a benign funder. They are a highly polarized group that has one agenda item, and it is supporting the state of Israel. And being a one-issue group like that is essentially saying that we're an agent of a foreign government, and yet they're not registered as such. And why not? Well, I guess you can just ask that question, how they get away with it. I think many know. So on the issue of the Palestine organizations, just recently, last week actually, directors of two of the organizations, Abaya Budi, he's the director of the Dassan Center, and Sahar Francis, who is the director of Adamir, were unable to attend the forum in Mexico City. And they were, in the case of Abudi, he was not allowed out of Israel, and which was in a way not a huge surprise. But what was more surprising to me was that Sahar Francis was able to leave, but she was not allowed to pass through the United States. So that is very concerning when the United States is working pretty much in complicity with charges that have never been supported. So anyway, those are just two very recent developments. So the issue of the six organizations is very much current, and will continue to be so, because it's just a fundamental it's an attack on just basic human rights, and it's a very dreadful example, because there's plenty of other countries that will do the similar things and have already. So there's plenty of authoritarian states that this is giving a very bad precedent for. So I'll leave it at, by the way, I didn't introduce myself. My name's Noble Larson. I volunteer, I must say, don't really work. I do work, but not for MAPA. I'm a volunteer with Mass Peace Action, with the Palestine-Israel Working Group in particular. So Barbara Lowe is going to read the petition regarding the six Palestinian organizations.
This is a petition that we sent to Secretary Blinken and President Biden. We the people and organizations in Massachusetts, including Massachusetts chapters of national groups, are writing to you about the Israeli government's false and dangerous designation of six leading Palestinian human rights and civil society organizations as terrorist groups. These designations were purportedly justified in a secret dossier and distributed to several EU governments that subsequently said the dossier did not include any concrete evidence. Many of us have personal experience with these organizations and their staff. We rely upon them for information about what is happening in the occupied Palestinian territories. You and our members of Congress need them to record and report what our tax dollars and support for Israel are enabling. Palestinians rely on these groups to see and hear them and record and report crimes perpetrated against them. Israeli human rights organizations trust and respect them and rely upon them to document what their fellow citizens and soldiers are doing to the people in the OPT, occupied Palestinian territories. According to the eminent Israeli human rights lawyer, Michael Svard, these 6 organizations are the backbone of Palestinian civil society and the Palestinian cry for human rights. Defense for Children International Palestine advocates for Palestinian children subject to the Israeli military court system with a 99.7 conviction rates and documents extrajudicial killings. Al-Haq, the oldest Palestinian human rights organization, established in 1979 to protect and promote human rights and the rule of law in the OPT. Adamir Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association defends Palestinian prisoners arrested in the West Bank, where about 1 in 5 people have been incarcerated in Israeli prisons from torture and other forms of abuse. Union of Agricultural Work Committees supports farmers resisting land grabs and other impacts of Israel's settler colonialism on agriculture and livelihoods. Bison Center for Research and Development advocates for civil rights, human rights, and socioeconomic rights. Union of Palestinian Women's Committees, a feminist progressive grassroots Palestinian organization. 25 Israeli human rights organizations declare in their joint statement, Draconian Measures Against Human Rights, quote, "We stand in solidarity with our Palestinian colleagues and call on members of the Israeli government and the international community to oppose this decision unequivocally." In Massachusetts, Representative Jim McGovern's letter to Secretary Blinken, he advised, quote, "Mr. Secretary, it is not enough to have expressed an initial leeriness regarding Israel's decision to designate these 6 organizations as terrorist groups. It is now time to firmly and unambiguously denounce the actions taken and urge the Israeli government to reverse its decisions." Finally, more than 100 global foundations and donors, most of them US-based, signed on to an open letter expressing solidarity with Palestinian civil society. The targeted assault against 6 of the leading society organizations in Palestine is a blatant attempt to silence and criminalize dissent against the human rights violations of the Israeli government. Your administration has expressed a commitment to promote human rights worldwide and protect the role of civil society. It is past time to stop sending mixed messages, verbally expressing disappointment at Israeli crimes while continuing to enable and even reward them. We call on you to take the following actions. Issue a public statement that rejects, condemns, and rebukes the Israeli government's false accusations and authoritarian actions leveled against the 6 organizations. Call on Israeli authorities to immediately reverse their decision and end all efforts aimed at delegitimizing and criminalizing Palestinian human rights defenders, and ensure that charitable donations designated for these organizations reach them without interference by the US or Israeli governments or by financial institutions. And when our group discussed with Casey Davidson this matter, we continued to get statements about, we have to look into it, we need more information, and that's just a stalling tactic. And for Katherine Clark, who's part of leadership, to hide in a hole and not speak out against human rights violations is disgusting. And she should be a leader, and she should be encouraging other members of Congress to support human rights and not abuse people as is being done now.
Free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Good job.
This is an issue that will break the Democratic Party. Maybe that's a good thing. They have to decide.
Thank you.
Their party
Great to see you again.
We can't speak to that because we're district employees.
Yeah.
It's not. Our ethics